Hello everybody, and welcome to this video in which I am finally going to talk about my favorite thing in the whole damn world, and that is Hatsune Miku. I haven't really had the excuse to do so in the past because the last time a major Miku game was released was Future Tone on the PlayStation 4, and that was before I'd started this channel. So I've been waiting, I guess, for some kind of timely excuse to actually talk about Miku, and now, thankfully, she's on Nintendo Switch. I think it's called Mega 39 or Mega Mix or something. I can't remember. It's just, the point is, it's Hatsune Miku on Nintendo Switch, and you have to go and grab it from Japan at the moment. There will be a localization down the track. We don't have an exact date for that yet, sometime in 2020, but you can grab it from Japan right now, and because it is just a rhythm game, it's very import friendly. You don't need to know the language to be able to get into the game and enjoy it, so I recommend importing it. I'm going to even do a review on digitally downloaded .net as though it is a Western release because, yeah, thank God for the region-free Switch, huh? It's really good. I absolutely love the game. And, like I said, this is an excuse to kind of talk about Hatsune Miku now because I haven't done it in the past, and I wanted to do this video, I guess, to kind of explain why I am so fascinated by this character. And I am indeed very fascinated by this character. I collect Miku figures. I think I've got about 60 or so now. Every time I go to Japan I come back with a couple more, and my collection's got to be worth a couple of $1,000 now. They can be quite expensive. Some of the upper end figures are $400 to $500, and I don't bat an eyelid to buy them. It's my hobby and I don't feel guilty about it at all. I also have a Hatsune Miku doll, which cost me a cool $1,000 all in itself, but it is well worth it. That doll is amazing and beautiful, and I love her a great deal. But yeah, I'm very, very, very much fascinated with Hatsune Miku, and oddly enough, I'm actually quite late to the party as far as hardcore Miku fans go. I actually only discovered Hatsune Miku with the first Project Diva game on the PlayStation Vita, which would have been, what, about 5 years ago now? So about halfway into Miku's career. She started about 10, 11, 12 years ago now. About halfway through I discovered what Miku was and was pretty much instantly a fan. I wasn't really sure what I was getting into when I actually got the review code to play the Vita game, but within about an hour I was really hooked, and I haven't really looked back since. So the thing that really caught my attention in the initial stages with that Vita game was the presentation of it. Most rhythm games have quite an abstract design where outside of the rhythm action there's not really a whole lot's going on because the developer wants you to focus on the buttons and the rhythm itself. But with the Miku games there's this really cool kind of video clip aesthetic going on in the background with the characters singing and dancing and all that kind of stuff. And you can play dress ups, you can put your characters in their favorite clothing, and all of that kind of stuff. And it was quite distracting in the sense that I would actually fail a lot of levels because I was really kind of split my focus between the game itself and the video clips. But I think given that Miku is all about the characters and that's where the strength of the property lies, that is actually good design for the context of this game series. And after getting really hooked on that, I then went and started to research Miku, and I discovered that it's all pretty much community driven. Krypton as a company, being the ones that created Miku, have a very open approach to their license. And whereas with most Japanese companies, if you were to create fan stuff, you'd have lawyers knocking on the door once it became popular enough. And certainly people who have tried to create Nintendo fan games, for example, have experienced that. As long as you're not making money with Miku, then Krypton's not going to bother you. It doesn't matter how popular your stuff is. If you want to make money, you can, and you can always, there's plenty of licensing options, and Krypton's quite open in engaging with the fan community that way as well. But in terms of everything to do with Miku, from the costume design to the dance routines to the music itself, it's all very cheap to get into. The Miku software is only a couple of $100, and you've basically given free rein to create and share, and through doing that, Krypton has built this really strong community of very passionate creators and fans, and Miku has become something like a canvas where people kind of put their own vision of her onto her and then, really engage with her that way. So Miku can be pretty much anything you want her to be. She can be really cute, she can be really sexy, she can be very elegant, she can be very rocky or punky, whatever you want Miku to be, she is. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that people are able to take kind of ownership of the character, and unlike with real world celebrities where they obviously have a personality of their own, and you're a fan of them for that. With Miku and with the other Vocaloids and other kind of digital characters, it's really more on your terms, and I found that really fascinating right from the start. And from there, I started to go further down the rabbit hole with Miku. I went to concerts, for example, and saw Miku live for the first time, and that really blew my mind actually, because perceptually, it really did feel like she was kind of there. Obviously, it's light screen technology and holograms and all that kind of visual trickery, but there is that definite perception that she's in the on the stage performing for an audience, and the audience, of course, are real people. 7,000-8,000 people, screaming fans, behaving just like they would with any other kind of pop idol or rock star. So that's when I started to think about Miku in broader terms, not just as a video game character, but perhaps what she represents in terms of society, in terms of there's kind of a social reading that you can make about Miku and other digital celebrities, which is this really new field that we haven't really had to engage with before, because digital characters have been quite primitive. But we're at the point now where they're really starting to actually impact on the real world, and that's become a really that's become an area that I've become very fascinated with and done a lot of study in, and written a lot of articles and pieces about. And I even have, a book in the works, if I can ever actually get to finish it, with an awful lot of research that I've done on this topic. And all of that started just because of a PlayStation Vita game that I wasn't even sure that I really wanted to play. So as I researched on about Miku, I got introduced to a concept which I find really fascinating and have read quite a lot of books about since. It's a psychological concept called the supernormal stimuli. And basically, a supernormal stimuli is an exaggerated version of a thing, a stimulus, to which the person, the subject, has a much more strong response to. It applies to humans, but it also applies to the animal world, and it is a psychological, kind of a biological, psychological concept. And it's been around for a very long time. Certainly well before Miku, and there are all kinds of examples of it. People have argued that things like television are supernormal stimulus, that also junk food is a supernormal stimulus, because it's kind of this created thing that makes you want it more than the natural, I guess, state of things. And Miku is a very good example of the supernormal stimulus, precisely because she is kind of so perfect, and also that you can really kind of take her and mold her into whatever you want, and you can make her your perfect vision. So I found that really fascinating, and I discovered that by going to an art gallery of all places after my first Miku concert. The day after, my wife and I went to a art gallery in Tokyo, and there was a really prominent Japanese artist that had set up this exhibition there with about 70, I think it was about 70 different kind of apocalypse scenarios. So you'd walk through this space and you'd be exposed to all of these kinds of ends of the world situations, and they kind of ranged from the really obvious ones that everybody talks about, like climate change or a meteor hitting the earth or nuclear warfare, for example. But there were a lot of ones there that got me thinking about things that we don't necessarily think about often. And one example was, in a box there was a figure of Hatsune Miku, and there was a description there that kind of really resonated with me and got me thinking about this whole supernormal stimulus stuff. The artist's name, if you are interested in finding out more, is Hiroshi Sugimoto, and the exhibition was called the Lost Human Genetic Archive. And I'll actually read the little intro, the little bit of text that accompanied the Miku section of that exhibition. So, it all began when I went to a Hatsune Miku 3D concert as a kid. I couldn't tell virtual from real. After a childhood immersed in gaming and anime videos, imaginary stuff is more real to me than actual things. To most young kids, reality is the fantasy. It's like homegrown Zen, and everybody's already reached Satori. But enlightenment was a dead end. Folks who spend their whole life dreaming couldn't be bothered to make babies, so the human race just petered out. Game over. So, I mean, like I said, there were apocalyptic scenarios. Each one had this little description that kind of told a story about how humanity might find its end, and what that section was really specifically talking about is the supernormal stimulus, the idea that it would be possible somewhere down the track, perhaps, for humans to become so wrapped up in the kind of the digital worlds that they're now able to create with their own digital characters, and they would then stop feeling like they need to have the interactions with other human beings. And there is evidence that that may be happening in a very early state right now. If you look at Japan's birth rate, for example, it is plunging, and there are many reasons that it is plunging. There are a lot of reasons. There are economic reasons and social reasons and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the reasons is that there's just no interest in having relationships in Japan anymore. There is an incredible number of men and women who are just have never been in a relationship, have no interest in getting married, have no interest in sex, and all of that kind of stuff. And part of the reason for that is that they have this supernormal stimulus here, which provides for their needs in that way, enough so that they don't feel like they need to engage with the real world. So this is definitely a topic which is both interesting from a kind of an academic point of view, but it's also interesting from the connotations that it might have for our society. So while you could say that Hatsune Miku is an early pioneer of this stuff, we are now getting to the point where we're starting to see a greater impact of the digital world in the real world, and people being able to kind of escape the real world or modify it to their liking. VR technology is becoming much more standard. AR technology is becoming much more common, and all of these things are allowing people to modify the real world with the digital world and interact with it in a way that is better suited to them. And we are starting to see, for example, a lot more digital celebrities as well. One of Japan's most popular YouTubers is a virtual idol. We're starting to see in science fiction more and more creators dealing with this topic. The more recent Blade Runner movie, I can't remember the subtitle of it, but it was very good, and it featured this idea of a hologram where you're able to set up rigging up in your house and beam a very realistic AI-driven hologram that will, very much act like your spouse or partner. And the main character has one of those because as a replicant he's quite lonely and ostracized from society. And that's exactly where supernormal stimulants will come in. People who feel like they are ostracized from society will stop feeling the need to interact with it because they'll have these other kind of solutions. And while we can't at the moment create holograms for personal use in the home, it's easy to imagine that we will get to that point, especially when we're seeing early experimentations there as well. There's a company in Japan called Gatebox, and you can buy this Gatebox, and it acts like a virtual assistant, like a Amazon Home or Google Home, Amazon Alexa, whatever. I don't have any of those things. But the Gatebox one has an additional thing where you'll get a small hologram anime character, and you could even get a Hatsune Miku version. And that anime character will interact with you, send you messages through the day, make sure the house is nice and warm when you get home at night if you set it up so that it'll turn the heater on and all that kind of stuff, and it'll welcome you when you get home and you'll be able to interact with it. And while this stuff all sounds quite funny, I know, and weird, the reality is that it is happening, and it's funny at the moment because it's quite primitive. And because it's primitive, it's only the really early adopters that are finding much value in it. But it is going to become more mainstream, I think, is the point. And I think that that's a conversation that society isn't quite ready to have yet. We haven't really thought about it. We haven't had too many people talking about it. It's been this very niche and kind of forgotten or untapped area for discussion, but it is going to have some very wide-ranging impacts on our society. And again, I discovered all of this because I really do love Hatsune Miku. It really is as simple as that. I am a big fan of Miku. I love the games, like I said. She is a major hobby of mine. I have dozens of CDs. I've got all the figures and all of that kind of stuff. And I have spent it'd have to be at least 1,000 hours on the game so far, and now that there's a Switch one, I've got plenty of reason to continue playing. It just makes me happy. I just really enjoy it. It's not like it's a super normal stimulus to me in the sense that I'm otherwise happily married and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just a fascinating character. It's a fascinating psychological idea to ponder through, and people who see Miku and just think anime character without any kind of context are really missing the point that actually Miku represents some really interesting stuff to think about. So I recommend getting into the games if you haven't already, and if you do enjoy the games, start to look at what Miku might represent, because yeah, I think you'll find it quite interesting. That's it from a pretty long video, so thanks very much for tuning in. I hope it was interesting and enjoyable. Please do like and subscribe so you can get plenty more of this content if you enjoy it. Otherwise, if you want to back me on Patreon, I'd really appreciate that as well. You do get free visual novels and stuff in return for doing so. And those visual novels are actually inspired by Miku themselves, because they feature a DD, which is my character I created, and I created the character because I was inspired by characters like Miku. So yeah, it all comes around. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you at the next video.